captain shoved her against the wall, then froze, realizing she was his commanding admiral. The sound of boots echoed sharply through the steel corridors of the naval base as a young woman entered for the first time. Her posture was firm, her uniform spotless, and her eyes carried the quiet confidence of someone who had seen more than she let on. She had just been assigned to one of the Navy's most disciplined and respected fleets, a place known for its strict rules and unbending hierarchy. Yet, the moment she stepped into the command hall, a wave of whispers followed her. Officers glanced at her with smirks, some doubting her capability, others amused that someone so young could hold a position among them. The captain, a man of great pride and authority, noticed her presence immediately. He had built his reputation on discipline and fear, and in his mind she didn't belong. To him, she was just another recruit trying to prove herself in a world ruled by men who thought they had seen it all. Later that evening, when the lights dimmed across the base, the captain returned to his office to find her standing there. She was scanning through a stack of classified documents on his desk, the soft hum of the ship's engines echoing in the background. Shock turned to fury in his eyes. Without giving her a chance to explain, he slammed the door behind him, the sound echoing like thunder through the room. In a swift motion, he grabbed her by the arm and shoved her against the wall, his face inches from hers. "Who gave you permission to touch these files?" he demanded, his tone sharp and cold. His authority filled the air like a storm, but to his surprise, she didn't flinch. Her expression remained calm, her breathing steady. She didn't fight, back or look away. She simply studied him with a look that seemed far too composed for someone supposedly beneath his rank. After a tense silence, she reached into the pocket of her uniform and slowly pulled out a metal badge. The light from the ceiling reflected off it, casting a golden glint that froze him in place. His grip loosened instantly. That insignia wasn't one carried by officers under his command. It was the mark of an admiral. His chest tightened as realization struck. The woman he had just shoved against the wall wasn't a subordinate. She was his superior officer. The silence in the room turned heavy. She finally spoke, her tone calm but cutting through the air, like a blade. "Is this how you treat your commanding officers, Captain?" The captain stepped back, his mind racing. His arrogance, his anger, everything that made him feel powerful moments ago vanished. He could barely find the words to respond. Her calmness wasn't arrogance, it was authority. True authority. She looked at him one last time before turning toward the door, leaving him frozen in disbelief. That night, for the first time in years, the captain realized that power didn't always come with volume. Sometimes it came in silence. The captain stood frozen, his fingers still trembling from the sudden shock that ran through him. The metallic glint of the badge she held seemed to slice through the air, burning its truth into his mind. That insignia wasn't something just anyone could wear. It belonged to the highest authority on the fleet. His throat went dry, and for a moment, even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade away. He realized the woman he had just shoved against the wall wasn't an intruder nor an overconfident officer. She was his commanding admiral, the same high-ranking official he had been ordered to meet within the week, the one whose inspection everyone had been preparing for. Now she stood before him, calm and composed, watching him drown in his own disbelief. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, cold, and controlled. "Is this how you greet your superiors, Captain?" The words cut through the silence like a blade, slicing away every bit of arrogance left in him. He stumbled back, his heart pounding, his mind begging to find an excuse. But there was none. She turned away without raising her voice or threatening him, which somehow felt far more powerful than any reprimand. By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire through the base. The woman everyone had dismissed as a newcomer was, in fact, the decorated admiral who had once led a rescue mission that saved an entire battalion trapped behind enemy lines. Every officer whispered her name with a mix of awe and fear. The captain tried to maintain his composure, but guilt lingered on his face with every salute he gave her. Still, she showed no interest in embarrassing him publicly. Instead, she chose quiet observation. During briefings and drills, she studied the way he commanded, his tone, his impatience, and his tendency to cut corners when no one was watching. He didn't realize it, but she had been sent not only to command the fleet, but to evaluate its leadership, including him. Over the next few days, she watched everything unfold with an almost surgical calm. She noticed how the crew feared the captain more than they respected him. Orders were followed, but never with confidence. Mistakes were buried instead of corrected. The ship ran on fear, not discipline, and every day she saw clearer the kind of man he really was. A man too proud to ask questions, too defensive to listen, and too insecure to see his own weakness. Yet, beneath that arrogance, she also sensed something else. The faint flicker of remorse. When their paths crossed in the hallways, he always stood a little straighter, saluted a little faster. He had learned his lesson the hard way. But what he didn't yet know was that the real test was only beginning, and the Admiral had no intention of letting arrogance command her fleet again. Days on the ship passed under the weight of a silent tension that everyone could feel, but no one dared to speak of. The Admiral carried herself with quiet authority, her presence commanding attention even in the smallest gestures. Her orders were calm, deliberate, and always perfectly timed, creating a rhythm of discipline that the crew had never experienced before. She never raised her voice, yet every command she gave was obeyed instantly. Even the most stubborn officers began to sense that she didn't need to demand respect. She earned it through precision, integrity, and an unwavering sense of purpose. The captain, on the other hand, struggled with the slow erosion of his control. He could feel the shift happening around him, the crew's loyalty slipping from his grasp and falling naturally into hers. Every salute directed toward her reminded him of his mistake, and every nod of trust she received made his pride ache. He had built his authority on fear, but she ruled with trust, and that made her untouchable. One evening, as the horizon burned with the glow of a dying sun, an urgent distress signal cut through the calm. A nearby patrol vessel had been ambushed by unknown hostiles, their ship taking heavy damage and losing communication. Without hesitation, the Admiral took command of the situation. Her voice was steady, confident, and unshaken as she began issuing rapid orders. The crew moved in unison, the control room alive with motion and focus. The captain hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to intervene or step aside. But as he watched her operate, his hesitation turned into quiet awe. Every decision she made was strategic, every move calculated with precision. She read the situation like a map, predicting enemy tactics before they even unfolded. Under her command, the ship maneuvered through danger zones, shielded the damaged vessel, and executed a counterstrike that forced the attackers to retreat. When the chaos settled, the rescued crew was brought aboard, shaken but alive. The base echoed with the sound of cheers and relieved laughter. The Admiral stood quietly at the bridge, watching the stars return to calm formation outside the viewing deck. The captain walked in slowly, his usual arrogance nowhere to be seen. He looked at her, not with defiance this time, but with respect. The mission had opened his eyes. He had witnessed real leadership, the kind built not on intimidation but on intelligence and empathy. The Admiral didn't gloat, didn't boast, and didn't remind him of his earlier mistake. She simply turned to him and said, "You did well to keep your men steady." Those few words humbled him more than any reprimand could. From that moment, the captain understood that strength wasn't about control. It was about guidance, sacrifice, and the courage to lead with calm when the world demanded chaos. The morning sun broke across the calm ocean, its golden light slipping through the blinds of the Admiral's office. The base was quiet, except for the distant rhythm of waves against the hull. The captain stood outside her door, his uniform perfectly pressed, but there was no pride in his stance anymore, only humility. After a deep breath, he knocked and waited for her calm voice to call him in. As he entered, she didn't look up immediately, continuing to review the reports laid neatly across her desk. When she finally did, her eyes met his with quiet strength. He stood at attention, his voice steady but filled with remorse as he said, "Admiral, I owe you an apology. I misjudged you, and in doing so, I failed my duty as a leader. These past weeks have taught me more than all my years in command." His words carried honesty, and for a long moment silence filled the room between them. The Admiral closed the folder in front of her and leaned back slightly, studying him. Then, in a calm, almost reflective tone, she said, "Leadership isn't about rank, Captain. It's about respect. Something that must be earned, not demanded." Those words struck him deeper than any punishment could have. He lowered his head slightly, realizing that true authority came not from titles or threats, but from the quiet strength that inspired others to follow. The Admiral didn't dismiss him or bring up his past mistake again. Instead, she handed him a new assignment, one that required him to lead a smaller division under her direct supervision. It wasn't a demotion. It was an opportunity. The captain accepted it with gratitude, determined to learn what real leadership meant. In the days that followed, he observed how she treated everyone under her command, with patience, fairness, and an unshakable calm. She listened before she spoke, acted before she blamed, and guided instead of commanding. The crew admired her deeply, not because they feared her, but because they trusted her completely. Weeks turned into months, and the ship began to operate with a unity and precision the base had never seen before. The captain found himself changed, his tone softer, his judgment wiser, his pride replaced with purpose. He worked harder than ever, not to prove himself to her, but to prove that he had learned from her. Eventually, the Admiral began to trust him again, assigning him more responsibility and eventually restoring his authority, this time built on respect, not power. The base that once whispered behind her back now stood as one strong, disciplined fleet under her command. And whenever new recruits arrived, nervous and unsure, the captain would gather them and say, "Remember, never judge strength by appearance. You never know who you're standing in front of." Those words carried the lesson that had changed his life forever, one born from a moment of arrogance and transformed into a lifetime of respect.